A week after my wedding, my wife's parents took us to a luxury retreat. They made me sleep in the basement while they ate lobster upstairs. My wife said, "You're just not used to class." I said, "No, I'm just not used to disrespect." An hour later, I sent a text that made her father's jaw drop mid-bite. "My name's Lewis. I'm 41 now, but this all started just over a year ago. Back then, I was freshly married, a little naive, and maybe a bit too hopeful that love could bridge the kind of gap that money, background, and upbringing often stretch into a chasm. I met Cassandra at a charity event in New York. My friend Donnie practically dragged me there. I build and sell homes, mostly in the Midwest, and I'm not usually the type of guy who hangs out in ballrooms sipping $15 cocktails. But that night, there she was, poised, elegant, and surprisingly down to earth for someone who could have passed for old money royalty. We hit it off. She liked that I worked with my hands. Said I was refreshingly real. I liked that she didn't treat me like a novelty. At least, not at first. I learned pretty quickly that her parents, Gerald and Celeste, were the kind of people who name their sailboats and refer to people who fly commercial as brave. They had the kind of old money that didn't feel the need to flaunt itself because it was the standard. From day one, they looked at me like an experiment. Her mother, Celeste, had this way of smiling like her teeth were too heavy for her face. Cold eyes, measured voice. She never raised it, but it could cut through skin. Gerald, on the other hand, was the kind of guy who could terrible the warmth out of a room just by walking into it. He shook my hand like I'd just handed him a dead fish. The first dinner I ever had with them, they served oysters, foie gras, and some kind of duck with a name I couldn't pronounce. Her mom glanced at me and asked, "Do you have any allergies?" I understand some foods are considered exotic to certain backgrounds. I said I was fine, but I wanted to walk out. Cass said they'd warm up, said they were just protective. Still, the way she didn't defend me that night, I should have paid attention. But love makes you want to believe in people. We got married in upstate New York, a small vineyard near the catslaughters. It was the most beautiful day of my life. My mom cried. My brothers drank too much. We danced under fairy lights, and I really thought that all the discomfort, all the condescension, all the weird little comments from her family, I thought it was over. I thought I was in. I wasn't. 1 week after the wedding, her parents invited us to a family retreat at a private property they rented in Bar Harbor, Maine. They framed it as a chance to get away and unwind after the wedding. I thought, okay, maybe they're finally trying. Bar Harbor is gorgeous. The kind of place that makes you feel like you're inside a postcard. Cliffside homes, pine trees framing the ocean, the smell of salt and moss in the air. We pulled up to this massive coastal house. Slate roof, glass walls, wraparound decks. Luxury in every way. We walked inside, and it was like a magazine, modern, open, filled with sunlight. But immediately, something felt off. Gerald handed me a single-room key. "You're in the lower level," he said. No smile. No explanation. I looked at Cass. She looked away. "Come on," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "It's quiet down there. You like your space." I followed her down to the basement. It was furnished, sure, rug, couch, queen bed, a mini fridge. But it was a basement. No windows. Cold air. Concrete behind the drywall. I put my bag down and stood in the center of the room, hands in my pockets. "Is this a joke?" I asked. She blinked. "What? They're all upstairs, and I'm sleeping in a basement." "It's not like that," she said. "You're just not used to class. This is how these places work." I laughed once. Dry? "No. I'm just not used to disrespect." She rolled her eyes and left. That night, I came upstairs and found them eating dinner on the deck. Lobster tails, steak, wine. 3 plates. 1 for each of them. No fourth. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Celeste looked up, her lips still wet with wine. "We weren't sure you'd be joining us," she said. I looked at my wife. She didn't say a word. That's when something broke in me. I walked back down to the basement, shut the door, and sat on the bed for a while, staring at the wall. My stomach growled. My brain was on fire. And then it hit me. A few years ago, I had gone in on some property deals with a friend of mine. One of the parcels we quietly acquired was a wooded area bordering this very coastline in Bar Harbor. At the time, I didn't think much of it. It was a long-term play. But now I had a very personal reason to put it to use. I pulled out my phone and messaged my lawyer. "Go ahead with the public zoning application for the land next to the redacted estate. I want trails and camp permits approved ASAP." Within the hour, Gerald got an alert. I know this because I heard the silence fall over the upstairs dining table. I didn't hear voices, just the scrape of a chair, the clink of silverware stopping. He read that email and knew exactly what it meant. His prized coastal view? It was about to become prime territory for public hiking trails and tent camping. I didn't go back upstairs that night. Cass came down around midnight. She stood in the doorway of the basement with her arms crossed. "You really think this is mature?" I looked at her. I felt tired. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just done. "I think it's fair. They're my parents," she said. "They were just treating me like trash." She didn't respond. I packed up the next morning. I left without another word. Booked a motel an hour inland and spent the next few days thinking. Cassandra called me the next day. I let it ring. She called again the day after that. And the one after that. I finally picked up on the fourth try. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear how far she'd go to defend what had happened. What she'd let happen. She opened with, "I think we both overreacted." That was the moment I knew she still didn't get it. There was no both in this. I had walked into a situation with good intentions, with respect, with the desire to be part of a family. What I got was a deliberate exercise in humiliation. "Cass," I said, calm but exhausted. "You let them treat me like a stray dog they had to put somewhere out of sight. You were in the room. You watched. You didn't say a thing." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I didn't think it would bother you that much. You're tough." That's when I knew this wasn't just about her parents. It was about her. See, when you grow up like I did, Midwest, 3 brothers in 1 bedroom, splitting chores and sharing meals with your cousins during hard winters, you learn that toughness isn't about swallowing disrespect. It's about standing up for yourself and others. She thought I was tough, like a dog that can be kicked and still follow you around. I thought I was tough like a man who knows when to walk away. "I'll be back in the city in a couple days," I said. "We can talk in person." She paused again. "Are you coming back to the apartment?" "I don't think so." Click. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just disconnected. There was nothing left to say. I stayed in Bangor for another 3 days. Took long drives through Acadia. Walked the coastline. I'd always loved the ocean, but that week it felt like therapy. Just me, some cheap motel coffee, and the wind. I kept checking with my lawyer, and he kept giving me good news. The zoning adjustment? Already in motion. The county office had no problem approving the trails. We were filing for public use permits. There were even plans to build a small welcome center on the edge of the parcel. Nothing commercial, no hotels, no noise. Just enough to make sure the land couldn't be bought out for private preservation. It was petty. I knew it. But it was also a stand. Because people like Gerald were used to controlling everything, their land, their image, the people around them. They weren't used to someone saying, "No, you don't get to treat me like this without consequences." A week later, I drove back to Manhattan. The apartment we shared on the Upper West Side had changed. There was a stillness to it. Like the energy had been terribled out. Cassandra had left a note on the kitchen counter. "We need to figure out what we're doing. I'm sorry. Sorry." No phone call. No waiting up. Just a note. I sat on the couch and stared at the bookshelves we'd filled together. The art she picked out. The rug my mom had given us as a wedding gift, rolled up and leaning against the wall. We had been married for 10 days before that trip. 10. The next few weeks were strange. We met for coffee twice. Neutral ground. Public space. She cried during the second meeting. Said her parents were old and set in their ways, and she didn't want to fight with them during our honeymoon phase. I asked her, "When would you have fought for me then?" She didn't answer. I asked, "If we have kids someday and they get treated like I was, do you teach them to stay quiet too?" She looked up at me like I had slapped her. That was the last time we met in person. The divorce wasn't messy. There wasn't much to split. We hadn't bought property together yet. No joint accounts. I kept the place in Milwaukee. She stayed in New York. The funny part is, I didn't tell anyone the full story at first. My friends knew something had happened. My mom said, "You looked happier single." My brother Kyle joked that I tried to marry into the cast of Succession. I laughed it off. But the truth was quieter. Sadder. It wasn't about the lobster, or the basement, or even Gerald's smug face. It was about feeling invisible in the one place where you're supposed to feel seen, your marriage. It was about hearing the woman you loved defend your humiliation because she didn't want to cause a scene. Because peace was more important to her than justice. But I wasn't raised that way. After the divorce, I went back to work. Threw myself into projects. Put more energy into the Bar Harbor land than I'd expected to. I got involved in the design of the trail system. Hired a local architect to work on the Welcome Center. Made sure it was made of local wood, low environmental impact, clean and simple. When it opened 6 months later, I flew back out. Quiet opening. No ribbon cutting. Just a few families with kids, some volunteers, and a reporter from the local paper. I walked through the trail that morning alone. Fog was still clinging to the trees. The ocean was just barely visible in the distance. I stood there for a while, hands in my coat pockets, breathing in the cold, sharp air. Up the hill, I could just barely make out the silhouette of Gerald and Celeste's rental property. I wondered if they were home. If they saw the kids running on the trail. If they recognized the benches with the little plaques that read, "Open land for all." Probably not. People like that don't really see others unless they need something from them. And Cassandra? She sent me one more message, about 4 months after the divorce papers were finalized. It just said, "I still don't understand why you had to burn it all down." I didn't reply, because I didn't burn it down. I built something. I never replied to Cassandra's last message. I thought about it. I even drafted a few responses. Some of them angry. Some of them trying to explain, yet again, what she refused to understand. But in the end, I just left it there. A read receipt. Silence. A mirror to how I'd felt in that basement in Bar Harbor. Unseen, unheard, but very much aware of where I stood. Instead of words, I kept working. The trail system turned out better than I expected. I partnered with a local school to create a summer program. Kids would come in, learn about forest preservation, help plant native shrubs, clean the beaches. Some of these kids had never seen a body of water that wasn't a retention pond behind a Walmart. I watched them light up when they found seashells. I watched them ask questions about trees, moss, and tide patterns. I never thought something that started out of spite could turn into something I was so damn proud of. Word got around. The local paper ran a piece on the land restoration, and my name was in it. That's when I started getting emails. Some people asked if I planned to sell. A couple developers dangled some money in front of me. One even offered to name part of the trail after me if I let them build luxury cabins on one side of the bluff. I said no. It wasn't about money. Not anymore. One email stood out, though. It came from Celeste. Subject line. Your Bar Harbor project. I opened it on a Wednesday morning while sipping coffee in my office in Milwaukee. The body of the email was short. 4 lines, to be exact. Lewis, I understand now what your intentions were. I hope one day we can have a conversation in person. Celeste, no apology. No admission. But even that felt seismic coming from her. I didn't answer her either. Instead, I printed the email and tacked it to a corkboard in my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that standing your ground doesn't always mean slamming doors or shouting people down. Sometimes, it's as quiet as letting them see the consequences of their actions play out in real time. Back in Milwaukee, life had settled into something steady. I wasn't dating, wasn't looking. I was still trying to understand how I got to where I had been with Cassandra, how I missed so many signs, how I let so many small slights slide past me under the banner of keeping the peace. I started going to therapy, quietly, without telling anyone. I didn't want advice. I just wanted clarity. My therapist, a woman named Joyce, early 60s, blunt in a comforting Midwestern way, asked me something in our third session that stuck with me. Do you think you married Cassandra because she reminded you of something you wanted or something you were told you should want? I sat with that question for days. The truth is, marrying her felt like the next step in the story I thought I was supposed to be living. Guy from blue-collar roots makes good, meets elegant woman, crosses into a different world. They build a life that bridges those two upbringings. But the bridge never held. It wasn't built on respect. And without that, nothing stands. As summer rolled into fall, I spent more time in Bar Harbor. Not just managing the trail system, but walking it. Hiking with kids. Meeting locals who thanked me for giving the land back. They didn't know the backstory. They didn't need to. Sometimes people would ask if I was from there. I always said no. But lately, I'd started thinking maybe it wouldn't be so bad to become part of the community. I even started looking at fixer-uppers nearby. Not big homes. Nothing fancy. Just something with good bones. One day in October, I stopped by the small general store in town to grab a coffee and a snack before heading up the trail. The woman behind the counter, Lorraine, early 50s, always wore this hand-knit sweater with cardinals on it. Gave me a curious look as she rang up my things. "You're the guy who opened the trails, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Well," she said, "someone left a note here for you. Said you'd be through eventually." She handed me a small envelope. My name was written on it, in cursive I didn't recognize. I opened it outside, sitting on the wooden bench by the window. It wasn't from Cassandra. It was from Gerald. Just a few lines, handwritten. "I underestimated you. I see now that wasn't wise. I hope we never cross paths again. But if we do, I'll be polite." There was no signature. Just his initials, GM. I laughed out loud, for real. A belly laugh, sitting there with wind in my face and a black coffee in my hand. That, I figured, was as close to an apology as Gerald would ever get. It didn't matter anymore. I had nothing to prove to them. The land spoke for itself. I was in Bar Harbor more often than I was in Milwaukee by that point. I'd wake up, drive out to the trail, and watch the fog lift off the trees like a curtain revealing a new day. Kids would come, run, laugh, leave with red cheeks and muddy shoes. The view that Gerald's family had tried to hoard for themselves? Now dozens of strangers enjoyed it daily. And I'd built that. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted something better, for me, and for anyone else who'd ever been made to feel small just for showing up. Around mid-November, the seasons shifted hard in Bar Harbor. The air had that sharp edge to it, the kind that stings your nose the second you step outside. The leaves had mostly dropped, carpeting the forest trails in golds and browns. The kind of scenery you see on postcards and desktop wallpapers. That month, I started spending the majority of my time in Maine. I hadn't officially moved. My place in Milwaukee was still there, still furnished, still technically home. But more and more, my days started and ended on the same rugged coastline that once served as the backdrop for my humiliation. It was strange how something could become sacred to you because of the pain it once held. The kids' programs had ended for the season. But volunteers from the local college came by on weekends to help with cleanups and prep work for the winter months. One Saturday, we built a small fire pit near one of the trailheads. Just a ring of stone and some benches, nothing elaborate. That afternoon, a group of high schoolers roasted marshmallows and passed around a guitar. I sat a little ways back, watching, sipping from a thermos of weak coffee. And I thought this is what the land was always meant to be. Sometime during cleanup, a woman I hadn't met before walked over. Probably early 40s, hiking boots covered in dirt, bundled up in a faded green jacket. "You Lewis?" she asked. I nodded. "You're the one who opened this up?" "Guilty." She smiled and offered her hand. "Sawyer. My son's the one who keeps tripping over his own feet with the guitar." We talked for a bit. She was from Ellsworth, worked as a physical therapist at a rehab center there. She and her son came to the trails every couple weeks. Said it had become a place they could just be, especially after a messy divorce. "I don't really know what you had to give up to make this happen," she said as we walked toward the parking lot. "But I hope you know it matters." That sentence stuck with me. She didn't know what I gave up. Not just Cassandra, or the marriage, or the future I thought I was building. It was the belief that I could fit into a world that saw me as lesser. That love, alone, could smooth over all the cultural potholes. And for a while, I grieved that. Quietly, privately. In between meetings with land use consultants and budget calls and visits to the lumber yard. Because there was a time when I wanted what she had. That polished, magazine spread life. Dinner parties with wine pairings and summer homes with names. But over time, I realized something. I was chasing the approval of people who would never respect me because they had decided not to. Even when I came in with nothing but love and good intentions. Even when I did everything right. It was never about me. It was about their need to keep their world closed. Controlled. Curated. And Cassandra? She had been standing inside that world, holding the door half open, telling me to squeeze in and not ask too many questions. One evening in December, just before the first major snowfall, I walked the main trail alone. The pine needles were damp underfoot, and I could hear the wind pushing through the trees like a distant conversation. About halfway in, I stopped at one of the benches we'd installed facing the water. You could see the cliffs from there, even the edge of the estate where Gerald and Celeste had hosted us. Or rather, hosted her and tolerated me. The house was empty now. Their rental was only seasonal. But it didn't matter. The ghosts of that weekend were still there. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my photo album. Not to look at anything specific, just muscle memory. There was still a folder labeled wedding. I hadn't deleted it. I opened it, scrolled through. Cassandra and me under string lights. Her laughing, head tilted back, my arm around her waist. Her veil blowing sideways in the wind during the vineyard ceremony. The two of us toasting with my mom and brothers at the reception. Then one of the last photos, just me, standing at the altar before she walked in, smiling like I had the whole world in front of me. I stared at it for a long time. And then I deleted the entire folder. Just held my thumb down and let it all go. The cold on my fingers was biting, but I stayed on that bench until it was almost dark. The ocean below was quiet. Not silent, just steady, unconcerned. I felt something settle in me that night. Not anger, not regret, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop trying to prove yourself to people who made their decision about you before you ever spoke a word. Over the next few weeks, I started sketching ideas for an outdoor education center. Nothing big, just a single building with multipurpose space, maybe a few sleeping bunks for extended weekend groups. A local nonprofit had already offered to help with staffing if I went through with it. It would take time, fundraising, permits, but it felt right. Like the next thing. Not revenge, just roots. And then, on Christmas Eve, I got a letter. A physical one. Real paper. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Cassandra. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, just staring at the envelope. I didn't open it right away. I wasn't sure if I even should, but I did. Inside the envelope was a card. Not one of those glittery holiday ones, just plain white with her initials in the corner. The handwriting was neat. Careful. "Lewis, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, especially now. But it's Christmas, and I guess I couldn't let the year end without saying something. I've had a lot of time to think, and I keep coming back to how quiet you were that night in May. I didn't get it then. I thought you were overreacting. Now I know you were retreating, and not because you were weak. You were shutting the door on people who didn't deserve your respect. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What I let happen. What I enabled. I've started therapy. I know that sounds cliche, but I'm doing it for me, not to win you back. I won't contact you again. I just hope, maybe someday, you'll remember the good parts too. I'm sorry. See no return address, as promised." I reread it once, then set it down and looked out the window. Snow was falling softly outside, coating the pines in white. Peaceful. Clean. Final. I didn't feel anything sharp. No rage. No triumph. Just relief. She finally saw what I'd been trying to say without ever having to say it again. And she was right. I was quiet that night in Maine. But not because I was retreating. I was recalculating. 2 weeks later, in early January, I got a call from my lawyer. Got something funny for you, he said. One of the board members from the Bar Harbor Homeowners Association reached out. They're asking if you'd consider putting up a barrier or a visual privacy buffer near your trail access points. Apparently, some of the folks are concerned about noise and, get this, unsightly hikers. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. The unsightly hikers were locals, families, students, volunteers, people who had more character in their muddy boots than Gerald had in his entire pressed wardrobe. Tell them no, I said. Actually, tell them I'm planning a summer youth retreat, overnight program. Campfires, music, tents, the whole thing. He paused. Are you? Not yet, but I will be now. That conversation led to a domino effect. The HOA sent a formal letter asking me to reconsider the nature of public activity so close to private estates. I responded by filing for an events permit with the town just to make sure I had all my bases covered. And then, the final push. I announced an annual community festival to celebrate the land's first full year open to the public. We called it Roots on the Coast. Food trucks, guided hikes, music, family tents, and a few local artisans showcasing their work. I didn't know what to expect that first weekend in June. I thought maybe a few hundred people would show. We got over 1,000. Kids playing tag along the trails. Elderly couples walking hand in hand. Teens painting rocks and stacking them along the overlook. And parked just far enough up the road, behind a row of evergreens, I spotted them. Gerald and Celeste, standing stiffly next to their car, arms crossed. Watching. Not saying anything. Just watching. I nodded once in their direction and walked on. Didn't wave. Didn't approach. I had nothing to say to them. They'd seen it. That was enough. By sundown, the festival felt like a scene from some movie I never thought I'd be part of. Music floating through the air. Smoke from grills and campfires. People singing. Laughing. Belonging. I stood at the top of the hill, looking down at it all, and someone handed me a drink. Sawyer, the woman from months ago. Her son, the guitar kid, was playing a cover of Fleetwood Mac on a makeshift stage. She raised her drink and clinked it gently against mine. You built this, she said. I smiled. No, I said. They did. I just gave them the room to do it. She looked out over the crowd. It's a good thing you didn't try to belong somewhere that didn't want you. Yeah, I said, sipping my drink. I built my own place instead. Because revenge doesn't have to be angry. Sometimes, it's just making something so beautiful, so undeniably good, that the people who tried to exclude you are forced to stand behind a fence and watch. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't burn bridges. It builds something better. And I wasn't done building yet.